The Ascent is a twin-stick style action RPG that immerses you in an absolutely stunning world filled with thugs, back alley bandits, and so much more. But have fans had their fill of cyberpunk games, or will a team of just 12 developers manage to capture hearts and minds with this gritty new adventure? Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, one half of the team behind Legacy Gaming, and today we dive in to find out if The Ascent is worth your time. The arcology is in complete chaos. The lower level thugs and gangsters are all vying for power, and the people in charge, the Ascent group, have gone completely dark. This is where your adventure in the Ascent begins, and what a wild ride it is. Before we dive in too deep, I'd like to thank Neon Giant and Curve Digital for providing both Livid and myself keys to the Ascent. It's always great when both of us get our hands on a game early. It means we can collaborate, bounce thoughts off of one another, and ultimately make better content for you. At its core, the Ascent is a twin-stick style shooter, but truth be told, boiling down the game like that is just a travesty. The Ascent is truly unlike any game we've played before, combining fast-paced, explosive combat, RPG elements that make progression feel meaningful, and a story that's not only fleshed out, but helps fully immerse you in a gritty and dark cyberpunk world. At this point, a lot of people may have PTSD when they hear the word cyberpunk, but hold on just a little longer, because the world this team of 12 manages to create is absolutely stunning, and actually, I don't even think that does it justice. In terms of the nuts and bolts, there are a few more details you need to know. The Ascent is available on PC and Xbox platforms and is available on release day July 29th for the Game Pass. The game can be played offline solo or with up to 4 friends, couch co-op style, as well as online with up to 4 friends. While it's not the biggest game you'll play this year, it's far from small. Livid managed to clock around 30 hours in his playthrough, completing the main story as well as various side quests in that time. Me, on the other hand, I stayed on the main story grind my entire way through and managed to get through the game in around 15 hours. We tell you all this so you understand that your mileage may vary, and I think Livid would agree that it's easy to get distracted and lose yourself in the world of Velis. If there's one thing that shines brightest in the Ascent, it's the world. This is simply one of the most stunning cyberpunk creations you will ever have the pleasure to explore, and when I say pleasure, I absolutely mean it. Take everything you know about the cyberpunk aesthetic and throw it out the window, because Neon Giant manages to completely evolve the idea. Everywhere you look, you'll see incredible detail, from bright neon signs and projected holograms to back alleys filled with heaps of garbage and oftentimes bodies. City hubs are packed to the brim with buildings, people, and things to look at, and the developer's use of verticality helps create a level of depth within the world that's honestly unparalleled. The arcology is broken down into a series of vertical levels. Think of it like a hierarchy. At the bottom are the slums, the maintenance levels, and the server rooms that power the entire structure. As you move up the tiers, the world changes, becoming more elaborate and ornate. And while things certainly change from tier to tier, the world never feels disjointed. You'll travel the same halls multiple times throughout your playthrough, and each time you'll notice new things, see something in a different light, and ultimately experience the world anew over and over again. Normally, we have a hard time laying this much praise on anything when it comes to video games, but Neon Giant absolutely nails this part of the Ascent. With a proper understanding of the world, let's dive into the rest of the game. I mentioned the Ascent isn't your typical twin-stick style shooter, and that's because there are a lot of other elements at play, chief among them, the story. We've already given you a snapshot. You're a nobody that works their way up the food chain as you get yourself mixed up with gangs, underbelly thugs, and altogether unsavory characters. Things start off slow and the story feels paltry, but by the end of your adventures, you realize just how far things have escalated. One of the highlights of the story is the writing and the voice acting, which really took both Livid and myself by surprise.
Welcome. If you'd have just accepted my call, we wouldn't have had to drag your ass all the way here.
My man! What the are you talking about? You got your little ambush. Not my fault your people got wasted because they sucked.
Each major character is fully voiced, and significant interactions are all animated, and this really helps keep you hooked into the game. The Ascent could have gone the same way as many games before, just putting some text on screen and letting the players read about what's going on, but here again, the level of detail is just superb. Not everyone is going to appreciate the campy, slightly 80s inspired writing, but the mashup of colorful personalities mixed with the overall story you're unraveling is just superb. On top of that, the game has an incredible codex filled with background information and fully animated holograms. I mean, what? I can see a good many people just getting lost in this particular aspect of the game, learning about the different gangs, races, locations, seriously, you name it, it's in the codex. At its heart, The Ascent is a story-driven game, which is why we're not going to spoil anything more here in this review, but we still have miles to go before you can truly appreciate everything at play here. If you're still having a hard time wrapping your head around the game, think of it like this. It's an action RPG with guns set in a distant cyberpunk future. Okay, that may be an oversimplification, but it should at least help you out. As you're exploring Veles, chugging along on the main quest, you'll also run across a number of different side mission opportunities. These play out exactly as you'd imagine. You talk to some NPC, they give you a little bit of backstory, then they present you with an opportunity to do an odd job. These fit nicely in the mosaic that is The Ascent, but honestly isn't much to write home about. The missions take you off the beaten path to different parts of the world, which is great, but at the end of the day, none truly stand out. And honestly, that's fine. In this case, side missions are truly a means to an end, helping players gain more XP, new augmentations, which we'll talk about soon enough, and ultimately help bridge the various power gaps within the game. The Ascent is an RPG after all, and everything eventually leads down that path. As you gain XP, you'll level up and allocate a number of different skill points. I won't break them all down because honestly it's exactly what you'd expect. Evasion reduces your dodge roll cooldown, vital signs increases your HP, things of that nature. What I will say is that you have to have an understanding of how these RPG elements play out, and planning ahead is hugely important because respecking at the grafter and NPC is a bit pricey and gets more expensive as you progress. So maybe you're not into story or world building and you just want to know about the action. I respect that, and there's plenty to talk about when it comes to combat in The Ascent. As we've mentioned, the game is a twin-stick style shooter, but unlike other games of the same design, I found myself wanting to play with a keyboard and mouse, primarily because of how tightly tuned certain aspects of the game are. Large-scale fights kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time, and having precision was paramount as I attempted to cut through huge swaths of enemies. When in a firefight, you have a few additional things to consider, like cover. It's not a true snap-in, snap-out system, but as we've mentioned before, the world is so detailed that you'll always find something to hide behind when in a pinch. You also have the ability to aim high, which allows you to shoot over walls and other obstacles, but you do have to use this carefully. Enemy height is a factor, and if you're shooting high over enemies that are just a few feet tall, you'll never hit them. It sounds a bit complicated, but after just a few hours, it becomes second nature. The rest of the destruction, well, that comes in the form of bullets and abilities. There are a number of weapon categories, and each gives players a different way to dispatch their foes. Unlike other games, there's no RNG here, and each weapon is handcrafted to the developer's specifications. Each machine gun, pistol, shotgun, everything is designed with a purpose, and that purpose, of course, is killing. One thing that actually does matter in the game is the type of damage that you deal. Now normally this is something I'd only half think about, but when it comes to The Ascent, you better pay attention or you'll end up dead in some gutter somewhere. Each enemy is weak to a certain type of damage, which is why it's helpful to have two weapons with different damage types active at all times. Even if you don't, it's easy enough to go into your inventory and make a quick swap. On top of the weapons are augmentations, or augs as they're commonly referred to in the game. Think of these like abilities. You can have two slotted at any time. You can buy them off vendors, receive them as rewards for side missions, or get them randomly off enemies. Augs completely change the way the game is played, and hats off to the devs for really leaning into the cyberpunk theme to make some truly interesting abilities. You'll pick up some augs during the main story, but if you really want to see the full scope of what the game has to offer, you'll need to complete side missions, which are the main way to acquire augs in The Ascent. There's also a tactical slot to take advantage of during combat, and this thing charges as you dish out damage. Starting out, you'll have a simple grenade, but you can eventually acquire items like healing auras, gravity stasis grenades, and even full-blown mech suits. Each takes a varying amount of time to charge up, but they can be a key component of your build if you so choose. Finally, let's talk about armor. You've got 3 slots: head, chest, and legs. Choosing the right piece of armor matters in much the same way choosing the right gun matters. Enemies will use the same 4 damage types against you, and if you're not prepared, you'll end up dead. Simple as that. One clear difference between the Ascent and other games is that you can't just ignore things like upgrades and damage types. If you do, you die. The game doesn't have any difficulty settings, and things are tuned around the story progression. It's a tight tune, and both Livid and myself experienced a number of deaths that might have been prevented if we spent just a little more time tweaking our loadouts. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little turned off by the game's menus, which is why I wasn't in the loadouts more often, because truth be told, they're not great. In fact, the UI in the Ascent is honestly my biggest critique. We're playing an RPG, and after years of conditioning, I've just come to expect certain things. The game doesn't make great use of the screen space, and sometimes you have to flip between detailed and simplified views to get a full sense of what's going on. This isn't a game changer and will hardly keep players from enjoying the Ascent, because at the end of the day, you'll get used to it and adjust, but there's definitely room for improvement. The one thing that might keep players from truly enjoying the game is the map, and my god, this thing is beyond frustrating. It's great that the team leans so hard into the cyberpunk theme, it really is, but maps need to be functional above all else, and this sadly just isn't. Because of the density of the world, it's really challenging to pop into the map and figure out where to go, and with no option for a map overlay, it makes it even more frustrating when you have to constantly tap into the full screen version just because you're having trouble navigating. Thank God there's another indicator system that helps guide players in real time, because without it, this issue would be amplified twofold. The Ascent is a great game, full stop, and when you consider that just 12 people managed to create such an elaborate world, it becomes that much more impressive. There are some things that hold it back, like the UI and the lack of endgame replayability, which is almost non-existent, but if you're looking for a solid game to sink a couple dozen hours into, look no further. For just under $30 or on Game Pass, you get to experience one of the most gorgeous cyberpunk worlds ever created. Dive into an enjoyable and fully voice-acted story, and relish in the cathartic experience of ripping apart enemies with unique guns and over-the-top augs. The Ascent is a fantastic addition to anyone's library in 2021, and it's overwhelmingly worth your time. If you all enjoyed this video, we'd love some support. We're chasing our yearly goal of 150,000 subscribers, so if you love video games and you want more in-depth reviews and fresh content in your feeds almost every day, please consider hitting that thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. It's still the single best way to help channels like ours reach new audiences. We also invite you to join us on Discord. We've got a great community of around 7,000 members, so check out the link in the description below to join today. Finally, if you like everything we stand for here at Legacy Gaming and you want to support us even more, you can now do so by becoming a member. For just a few bucks, you're helping evolve the channel and take our community to that next level. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.